Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Unati Mwepe, and I am joined by the lovely Judith Anser. She is a clinical psychologist by profession, and she is involved in the private practice located in Johannesburg. She has done extensive work in training, supervising mental health professionals, and she basically has worked within the clinical platforms, educational as well as corporate settings. She has even published a book on mental health in the workplace and is very interested in helping others learn to tolerate their imperfections and uncertainties, and that will allow for us to actually survive in discomfort and learn more as well as strive to be better. Hi, Judith.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, and thank you so much for having me because this is such an important topic.
100%. And from what I can see here, you have done extensive work, more so within our holistic mental well-being. So just to start off our discussion, I just would like to find out your view because of we speak a lot about mental health in social media. So can I ask how you've seen it evolve in your day-to-day space?
Okay, so understanding how self-care is part of our mental well-being. I mean, I think that there's much more chat about it. And of course, there are lots of influencers who tell you how to look after yourself the best way. We have to watch out that it has become really commercialized and that self-care is not simply buying more, having more. It's not only about things that make your life more comfortable. There may be things that we do for self-care that are difficult, but that I do see there is a discussion around it. And what I would like is for us, like through platforms like yourselves, to understand that self care is holistic. It's not something you just take a photograph of and put on your Insta account. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about it, but maybe a lot of people don't always understand what good self care is or what healthy self care is. Yeah.
100%. So I like that you're even pointing that out. So it's so commercial, like take a shower, those type of stuff. Perhaps can I get your definition on what it truly looks like within our mental well-being? Because you said it's holistic. So what
Mm.
does it look like for us in our everyday to-day life?
So, self care in our everyday life is not about doing things perfectly. That is literally can ruin your self care and your mental health if you try aim for perfection. Self care is about recognizing what is it that you in your body need in this moment on this day. It doesn't mean that you don't care about other people. Self care is not selfishness. Self care allows you to fill your own resources without getting depleted so that you can be available for the commitments and the connections that you have. And as you already said, self care has to be holistic. It can't just be about what you eat or what you do, it's got to be about how you think, how you connect, how you behave.
100%. I like you pointed out the fact that people feel like it's selfish.
Mm.
Can I just tweak on how where does this guilt come from? So when somebody says I'm actually taking some time off, I need to get back to myself. Where does the guilt come from, and how can we learn to see self-care as something that is essential instead of being selfish?
So I think there are lots of cultural, social, and historical messaging that shapes, especially women and especially us in South Africa, to say that actually we are responsible for other people. So people often, especially I'm going to say women, but not only women, find it easier to care for other people. And I think there are a lot in a lot of our communities that is really valued. And that is something children are taught from young. Look after your little sister, look after your granny, look after people. And of course, that's really important. That connection, that being part of a community is so important for our psychological well being, but it can be exhausting. You know, we hear a lot in South Africa about black tax, how people who are maybe the first employed in their communities have such a strong need and a strong obligation to send money back home, to look after. And sometimes then taking time out or spending any money on yourself can feel like you're taking away from all those people who rely on you. But it can be broader than that, that even in communities where there's privilege, people are often told that it's selfish to look after yourself, you're being trivial, you're being frivolous, and people don't understand that self-care is not indulgence, it's a necessity. So that guilt is real, and we have to move away from seeing self-care as selfish, again, to seeing it as something that sustains you. They often talk about like if you're always giving, you emptying your cup. And if you're never filling your own cup, how are you going to look after other people as well? So the self-care is not only there to sustain you, it actually in the long term sustains all the people that you are committed to.
100%. Like you are pointing out on genuine issues that we have, especially in the broader society, because of if ever I get to a point where I'm employed and because life is tough, I take care of everybody. And that is something that just there, it's a norm. So you are calling out something that maybe most of us are not comfortable calling it out at home, and even speaking about it. So right now, I am conformed to actually saying you have to take care of everybody else. How can I take steps without feeling like I am being mean, but rather actually put that foot first to say, I'm taking care of myself? How can I do that?
So the first is to understand that self-care is not does not mean taking away from other people. It means looking after yourself in order to look after others, as if that's what you have to do. And that self-care also shouldn't be something that has to be expensive. In fact, there are many ways that we can look after ourselves, boost our own well-being that can cost absolutely no money. So, for example, one of the things, it sounds so obvious, is just to practice breathing properly. It sounds so obvious because we have to breathe in order to live, like all of us are breathing now. But we need to actually be aware that if we can slow down our breathing, even just for 30 seconds, if we can just practice, there's something called coherent breathing, which sounds like fancy, but all it means is breathing in for a count of three and out for a count of three, and doing that 5 times in the morning. When you wake up, practicing it means that when you are stressed, when there's a horrible phone call from a boss, when you're in the traffic and people are, driving badly, when you're upset with your child, if you just have practiced that slowing down your breathing, you will feel calmer, you will feel more emotionally regulated, and you will have looked after yourself. And people think that can't be self-care, but of course, that's one of the basics. So, one of the important things is self-care is sometimes about doing tiny little things. One of the big mistakes I see happen with my clients and with people when I do talks about self-care is that people think they have to do everything all at once. They've got to suddenly put 10 new things in their diary. And tomorrow I'm going to start eating healthy. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to make all the appointments I need to make. And then they're overwhelmed. So start slowly, start small, get the small, quick wins, something like the breathing. So start off slowly. And also that sometimes self-care is not adding new things into your life, like going for a run. It can also be about taking things away, about reducing. What is it that I can say no to? So can I say no to the social arrangement that's stressing me out? And can I take something off my plate? So that's another way of thinking about self-care.
Yeah, I really love how you're putting it out because of I think it's a norm that we're all thinking that self-care is this nice things. It's all this extravagant stuff. And you saying that actually it's not about that, it's about taking some time out, actually saying I'm gonna do something small. Sometimes you can add whatever you have to add, and then sometimes you have to take away from
Absolutely.
what is causing you to feel overwhelmed. So I think that kind of like points out to something that perhaps social media has influenced a lot. As you had mentioned, that it's so commercial, but actually we are having to reflect back on our own mental well-being in essence. I just want to ask because of at times we do take care of our physical well-being. If I'm sick right now, I have symptoms of flu, I run quickly to the doctor. Why is it important to actually prioritize my physical self as much as I prioritize my mental well-being?
Absolutely, because self-care's got to be holistic. And then if you're not looking after your body, you can't have a healthy mind. It's the healthy mind, healthy body. I'm so glad to hear that when you're sick, you get help. People need to do that, whether it's psychological distress or physical distress. I worked out, I didn't make this up, but I often, when I do my talks on self-care, I say there have to be different ways that we engage in self-care. And one of the simplest things we can do is to move. So physical well-being is both about getting help when we're unwell, and and that's where like some self-care is not nice, like going for a checkup or saying no to that extra donut in the day, maybe a form of self-care. But there are ways that we can move. I think movement is so important, and it doesn't have to be like a fancy gym trainer or anything. It can just be about a walk. I think one of the best ways we move is to integrate movement and physical activity and music. We know that playing music, having a playlist that's like music to make me feel better, is one of the ways we lift our moods. So if you put on a playlist and just dance for 5 minutes to your favorite song, just move, you're getting in physical well-being and you're lifting your mood. So that's like a real win of self-care.
Yeah.
Um,
I absolutely love that. So right now, you're pointing out that if we were to just put in music as a way to kind of like put in self-care, that could help us actually even feel better. So there is that part where some of us are not even sure whether we're overwhelmed or we're actually burnt out. So what kind of different self-help can we use to actually help us combat those?
well, we want to try and intervene early. And that's
Okay.
why, even if you're feeling good, start practicing some of the simple ideas that boost well-being, the breathing, music, exercise, going. I'm a big believer in park run because it's free. You can actually walk it. You don't have to run it. It's not a competition. But start with those small things even when you're well. Because then when things are tough and you're burning out, you've got some resources. But let's say you haven't started those things and life is hard. You're under huge amounts of stress. Sometimes then self care, while still important, isn't enough. We have to see that self care has to be like linked with actual mental health care. You might find that if you are so burnout is not the same as depression, but the symptoms of burnout, like not caring about your work, being irritable, being frustrated, having low physical energy, if untreated, if not addressed, can lead to significant depression and anxiety. And then you really need to reach out to professional help, to somewhere like SADAG for resources. So I think what's important is to put the self care in place now. And even if you're starting to feel burnout, see what feels like. That's often where you want to take things away as a form of self care. Can you schedule some leave from work? Can you like ask for help is a very important form of self-care and really, really important. So don't let it get to that point. But if it's already got to that point, really reach out for help. Don't try and deal with it on your own.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the most difficult things that perhaps people do find is actually knowing when I'm actually burnt out or knowing that I'm actually not okay right now. So we tend to gravitate towards following the simple trends of self-care. What can I do that is practical to help me check in with myself and actually find out what kind of self-care do I really need?
So, I use this sort of framework of saying that everyone needs to move. We
Mm-hmm.
also need to refresh and reflect. So, refreshing ourselves is things like making sure we sleep well, maybe mindfulness, prayer, meditation. That's refreshing ourselves. But reflecting, and that is waking up in the morning and saying, what is it that I need to do for myself today? Checking in with yourself. How am I feeling? Often, those of us, especially with busy jobs, with families, with children, you wake up in the morning and the first thing you're thinking is, I've got to get the kids to school, I've got to get to work, my transport is late. And you don't think so. 30 seconds while you're doing your breathing in and out, you think, what is it that I need from myself? I know that I sort of was talking about burnout and depression, but one of the ways of thinking about it is if I say to you, if you're feeling really burnt out and stressed, and I say to you, I'm going to give you a holiday to a beautiful resort. It's going to be like all those influencers in their spas. And you think, oh, I'd love it. And you go and you feel better. Then you've got burnout. But when you are clinically depressed, even the idea of going away doesn't make you feel better. When you have a clinical depression, nothing makes you feel better except treating that depression. And that's the distinction. So you don't want your burnout, which is fatigue, exhaustion, boredom, and frustration, to become depression, because depression is much more complicated to treat. It needs professionals. So check in with yourself, reflect, what is it that I need? I think another really useful strategy is some people will use journaling. It's private. It's not about making a diary for anyone else to read. But if you just every morning or every evening before bed write down, these are the three things I'm worried about, it often allows you to sleep better. And when you wake up in the morning to write down, this is what I need to do for myself today, be conscious of it. And again, small things. Don't try to do everything all at once.
100%. I truly do like how you keep on reiterating that we need to do small things, simple things, things that are manageable to us. And you also pointed out that if somebody were to go to a spa and then they feel great after that, that was burnout. But if ever you are depressed and it's something that's clinical, it does require more intervention. So right now, a person is struggling with anxiety and depression, and they're at a point where it's quite difficult for them. What are some realistic self-help tools perhaps they could use to actually help them cope with what they're feeling at that time?
So the first is to know that anxiety and depression are not weakness. So that's the understanding that depression and anxiety are not weaknesses. They are not personal failures. They are the effects of either your circumstances, often trauma, untreated life stresses, and maybe your genetics. They're outside of our control often. So the worst thing you can feel is to blame yourself. So part of self-care is understanding that depression is not your fault, but also knowing that depression is highly treatable. It's something we can treat. Not always, it's not a quick fix, but reach out for help. Make a call to somewhere like SADAG. Don't do it on your own. Sorry, scratchy
Okay.
throat. I'm going to have a sip of water quickly. Mm.
Not a problem.
But I think if you are really tearful, don't reject help. Reach out, if you can reach out to a trusted person in your life, someone in your community, or a doctor or a mental health nurse. Those are people who are going to offer you support. And if you are depressed, have small goals. I keep saying about the small things that matter. There's actually a whole theory of it. Some of you might have read the book Atomic Habits, which is about saying if you do a lot of small things, over time they build up to big change. So, one of the small things you can do when you're feeling depressed is to make sure that you put in a routine, that you get out of bed, you set an alarm, and have a shower. You know, simple things like that. Brush your teeth, breathe. So, small things.
100%. So right now, you've said an extensive list of things that we could try,
Mhm.
but some people are very busy. They're simply just tired and don't know where to start. Um, what can a person do, let's say just to start off this week, to actually start showing up for themselves? What can that look like?
Yeah, nobody needs a lot of time to start looking after themselves. During the lockdowns for COVID, I was involved in a project that SADAG was also very involved in, looking after the mental health of care workers, people working on the front lines, the nurses. And sometimes in those situations, they only had 30 seconds between patients or walking down a corridor to do some self-care. And there are things you can do if you've only got 30 seconds, if you've only got 3 minutes. And some of those are about um, the breathing I spoke about. I would say something like if you have a prayer, a verse, a quote that means something to you, write it out, print it out, put it on your mirror. And then when you're feeling down, just look at it. Um, if you've got people who mean something, connect with people. That's a very important form of self-care. Put their photograph on your screensaver on your phone. Um, have a playlist. Have a playlist that's a pick me up in the morning playlist and play a song. Those are small things you can do. If you are feeling really stressed and you're feeling rushed, sometimes you just need to use internal language, self talk to say, this will pass. You know, there's a saying, this too shall pass. Slow yourself down. You know, some of you may have watched the series The Big Bang Theory. And there's a
Yeah.
very quirky character, Sheldon. And when anyone's distressed, he always offers them a warm beverage. And you know, we know that sometimes all you do is you make yourself a sweet cup of tea, and you hold that warm cup in your hands and you just slow down for 3 minutes, drink your warm beverage. So those are small things you can do. The other thing I want to give a very practical tip you can do if you're feeling stressed is there's a technique where it's like, what do I notice? So you just have to sit in your chair in your the call center you're working in, or even if you're on a taxi or whatever, and you can just for a second think, I want to name three things I can see. And that's a distraction technique. What are three things I hear? You can just notice where you are in the world. That's a form of mindfulness. So those are techniques you can do when you're feeling really stressed.
I appreciate that so much. And you just literally just gave us a bit of a layout on how that could look like for everyone. I want to just tap into your reasoning to actually even write a book. And your book is titled, you wrote a book on mental health in the workplace. So I would like to know what motivated you to actually write this book and what sparked for you to actually even get to that point of saying people are exhausted. What sparked for you, and how can people get a copy of your book right now?
So I started writing this book just before lockdown with an organizational psychologist colleague. I had worked a long time in an employee well-being program, supporting their clinicians who were working with people in big corporates, small companies. And what I noticed is how stressful the workplace is, and often how managers and HR practitioners in the workplace didn't know how best to help and support the mental health of their staff. And I realized this was a real lack in the workplace. And if one can make, firstly, managers, employers, and employees aware of both their rights and the things they can do to facilitate better mental health in the workplace, how to have a healthier workplace, a happier workplace, a more connected workplace, but also for people to have realistic expectations of their workplace. That helps. We are interestingly working on a second edition of the book to also look at the impact of AI on the workplace and tech. But if anyone wants it, it's still available from Exclusive Books and I think from a company called Knowledge Resources. If you go online and you put in my name, you can order the book from Knowledge Resources. But what we know is that people spend a lot of time at work. We spend a fortune of our lives at work. And if our workplaces aren't healthy and we aren't healthy in our workplaces, then it's a terrible tragedy for our community. So that's why I thought it was so important.
I really appreciate it. Like in the beginning, I had said that you try your best or level best to pointing out mental health in a holistic way and actually understanding the uncertainty and imperfections are part of us. And what we can do is actually work within ourselves to strive to be better. And with you writing that book, it points to exactly what you're interested in. It points to the fact that we spend a lot of time at work. If my workplace is not healthy, I'm not healthy. So at some point, something has to give. And at the end of the day, it has to start with you. So I really appreciate it. And it's one of those things that I have to now go get my book. And I'm also excited about the AI one. It sounds quite interesting. I do appreciate you joining us today and taking your time to help us understand more about self-care and break it down instead of just us thinking of it as a trend, but rather recognizing that we need help. We need to look after ourselves as much as we take care of our mental well-being as well as health, physical health. This is something that we ought to do more regularly. So I really do appreciate your time.
And can I make one last point? Is
Okay.
that part of self-care is connection with others. Of course,
Mm,
self-care is about the physical, it's about the meditation, the breathing, the reflecting. It's also about treating yourself every now and again. Like they say in Parks and Rec, treat yourself. That's also really important. But I
mm,
think that connection, community, being involved with things that are bigger than yourself. So one of the important forms of self-care is to work at finding meaning in your life. What is the meaning? What is the why of what I'm doing? The how, all the things I've said, the breathing, the music, the dancing, the park running, the doctor's appointments, speaking to your financial advisor, drawing up a budget is self-care. But that's the how. The most important issue, which is maybe for a whole other discussion, is the why. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? And how do I live with difficult circumstances? Many of us, many people live with such difficult circumstances. How do we find a why that makes those difficulties worthwhile? For me, that is the core of our self-care, is working towards that. What is the why that I'm living
yeah.
for? So that
Wow.
in that. Yeah.
Definitely, you are leaving us with the big question. I think right now that's one of the questions one has to take when they're sipping the tea, just to reflect. Why is it I'm doing this? Why? Just ask themselves that why. So that's a big question. I appreciate it, and I would like to encourage anyone that would like to share this conversation with their loved ones. Please do. You can find the recording on our YouTube channel. As well as remember that we offer free support groups as SADC. You can find this on our website at www.sadec.org, as well as give us a call on 0800 212223. And thank you so much for joining us on our Ask the Expert session. Thank you so much, Judith, for joining us. And I wish everybody a pleasant day forward. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.